Just wait until it's on the CMS, please. Lovely. Is that the pre-roll?
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the ANC's National Elective Conference. We're coming to you live from the Nasrec Expo Center. This is our special edition of POLOTIKI brought to you by News 24. My name is Mashase. During the week, Secretary General Gwede Mantashe promised us that we will have a new ANC president come Sunday. But of course, that is not happening anytime soon. Day 2, and we are expecting that long-awaited battle over the adoption of credentials. Last night at around 11 p.m., the leaders of the ANC decided to abandon that debate. This was as the Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, took to the stage telling delegates that the credentials are yet to be finalized. Later on, we got to speak speak to the outgoing chairperson, Baleka Mbete, who confirmed to us that they still need to clean up their credentials. Of course, credentials are very, very key to this conference. Essentially, it hasn't really started until the credentials are adopted, because credentials are what tells us if the right delegates elected by their branches are representing their branches here at this conference. They will also tell us the final tally from the provinces, because as we know that earlier in the year they allocated each province numbers of delegates that they can bring to the conference, but we know that there have been problems in some of these provinces where branch meetings could not correlate. Therefore, those branches don't qualify to be here at this conference. One of the disturbing things that we're hearing continuously from delegates and also from National Executive Committee members is that there has been fiddling with the registration of delegates. There are allegations that there are some senior NEC members who tampered with that registration process, swapping delegates that were elected by their branches and replacing them with bogus ones. And of course, with this tight race, everybody wants to ensure that the right people are here at this conference. Well, we'll be talking about that as we look forward to what will happen with day 2 of the ANC's elective conference. I'm now joined by News 24 political journalist Tshidi Madia. Tshidi, conference was delayed yesterday. It started hours late. We had President Jacob Zuma finally giving the opening address. But the key thing here is credentials. What are we hearing?
Absolutely, Matata. The key thing is credentials. That's what we've been waiting to see, whether or not they'll be able to adopt the credentials by the end of the day or even tomorrow. We know that it could be a lengthy fight. We've heard reports that it could become a violent fight as it is. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen. As you spoke now about the tempering of the registration, you saw the WhatsApp groups going around saying that Fikile Mbalula, Nomvula Mokonyane and Jesse Duarte were fiddling with the registration. But some members saying, but those people are the deployees as far as credentials and registration is concerned. But we are hearing lots of rumors, none confirmed obviously by the SG's office himself. So we're kind of waiting to see how it plays out. And it's also important because it kind of tells you where this battle is going to go, depending on who passes, which branches, which are in support of who, which delegates, which rather candidates. That kind of gives you an idea of what will happen when the ANC eventually gets a president.
So it seems like we're back where we started, that risk of the conference collapsing forever present in this conference.
Absolutely. If you remember in the lead up to conference, some people were questioning the verification process, saying that Gwede started that process really late in the game and that it was done way too quickly. It's a meticulous process. It is exhausting. It is a long process. And it made no sense to some of the ANC members that it took place in under a week. So that in itself is going to be an issue. You're speaking now about bogus delegates. Some delegates have already said that there are people who are there amongst them who they don't know from their branches. And so that's already an issue. You're hearing that KZN, which had over 800 branches.
870 branches.
870. Some have already been disqualified. Some couldn't correlate. But now you're hearing rumors that they have about 900 delegates in the room. So things like that need to be cleaned out. They need to clean out the system in order to make sure, as you said earlier, that the delegates who go and actually vote for the ANC leadership are the people who are mandated to do so.
Obviously problems. This has just been marred by so many problems. It was the court judgments on the eve of the conference where we saw delegates from the Free State, Northwest Bujanala region and also the KZN PEC barred from participating in this conference as voting delegates. And now this problem of credentials still hanging on this conference. The key person here, people are telling us, is that it's going to be Baleka Mbete, who is chairing that meeting.
Absolutely, Baleka Mbete plays a pivotal role in the ANC. I do know she came out to speak to us last night about her own candidacy because she did want to become the next president of the ANC. She is important. How she handles the delegates and the processes in the lead up, through credentials, in the lead up to the elections is very important. And how she does it is also very telling of where she stands as far as this race is concerned.
Of course, as Tshidi was saying there, Baleka Mbete came out to speak to us late last night. People were expecting that she would likely endorse presidential candidate Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, but a shocker. She came out to tell us that she is now endorsing Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's take a listen.
What we are announcing is that we publicly endorse Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, that we have been talking and we agree on how to approach the issues of maximizing unity in the organization, in particular moving towards 2019, because it would be wrong for us to have a limited approach to what we have come to do here. The major part of what we have come to do is to look at how we mobilize South Africans, how we reorganize ourselves such that we can deliver better to them, and in fact we ensure a victory at the 2019 elections. And therefore we think that we should always think not very much here and now, but we should think far, as we have a broader responsibility to our people. So in brief, that's what it's about.
Mebaleka, why Cyril Ramaphosa? Why not Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma?
Because we have worked together for a long time, and in how we have discussed the issues that are faced and the challenges that are faced by the movement and South Africa, we have agreed a whole lot more.
Did you manage to sit down with Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and did you not agree with her on the things you've agreed on with Cyril Ramaphosa?
We haven't had a discussion that is as detailed. In fact, there was never an opportunity really for that.
Are you not afraid that you might be criticized for not supporting a woman candidate, given that this is historic for the ANC? 3 women presidential hopefuls were there.
I'm not afraid, really. The thing is that, in fact, as we are here as cadres, as individual members of the African National Congress who have something to contribute. And I'm quite sure we will work together with Comrade Nkosazana and each and every other candidate. But in the main, we are talking about within the key leadership, we want to work together. We have always worked together for a long time with Comrade Cyril, as you know.
Have you discussed perhaps I suppose possibilities of you being accommodated by Cyril Ramaphosa to work with him if he's elected?
I think we should leave those issues to details that will probably come out as the next 24 hours unfolds.
But are you willing to?
Oh, yeah.
Have you, from where you're standing, I mean, what are your impressions? Does he have the numbers? Does it look positive?
It does look positive. And I think also, like we were taught by Madiba, you should bring people that come from different experiences, from different perspectives. And that way you mobilize many more people who have been part and parcel of those experiences. And that way you rake in more people and a broader spectrum of people that you influence and unite. And I think unity is paramount here. And therefore part of what this is about giving meaning to unity, so that we don't talk unity that has no meaning, but we talk unity that is practically going to give us something more tangible.
We're expecting a very heated credentials debate tomorrow. I'm wondering if you could give us details why the whole process was postponed to tomorrow, and are you ready to manage that battle?
I think they're still cleaning up the credentials, and the reason we thought we should adjourn is to give a lot more time so that we can have time to address and give more chance for people who have any issues to raise them, and those who are listening to them to deal with them.
Baleka, just a quick one. When nominations are finally open, will Baleka Mbete be available for any of the top positions that they currently are?
I think so.
You spoke about thinking of long term, and that's what you thought about when you took the decision to endorse Ramaphosa. Is that long term the 2019 elections? Do you think he's the leader?
In the main, I think that's where the ANC must focus on. So in our discussions, I stressed the importance of not just looking at conference winning, this kind of short-lived gains, but to say what is it strategically we are working towards for our people that we can actually deliver for South Africa. And it was within that context that we held the discussion.
Well, that there was the outgoing chairperson of the ANC, Baleka Mbete, not ruling out the possibility of a top 6 so late in the campaign, Sidi?
Can I just first tell you how beautiful she looks yesterday?
She really, she looks
stunning.
amazing.
We've got to be able to give that
Marriage does things to you, hey?
So says the missus. Look, she, it's such an interesting thing. You know, she spoke about how you mustn't think near, you must think far. And she speaks about unity, which are important things, absolutely. But most people believe Balega's just looking out for Balega. She knows that she's got no chances. Will her name come from the floor? Maybe it will, but she also knows that she wouldn't meet threshold. I think she's well aware. So at this point in time, I think she thinks she's giving them an olive branch. I think she's extending an olive branch to Cyril Ramaphosa, and maybe something will come off of that. But Baleka Mbete doesn't have enough support. She's not going to give Cyril any numbers. Why would they give a top 6? There's nothing there to barter with. I don't see the point. I think she hasn't thought her position through properly. Actually.
I think maybe at the most we might end up with her in the National Executive Committee, because as things stood, it looked like she was due to face a political wilderness of sorts.
And I think that's why she's come out the way that she has. She doesn't want to go into the wilderness. It's a last-minute move to try and salvage her political career, be something, you know. So I do think she might end up in the NEC, but definitely not seeing her in the top 6. I believe those conversations, those talks, are pretty much in the bag. I think as far as the CR17 camp is concerned, they're pretty much happy with everybody. Even the DSG position, the Deputy Secretary position, which was left open, if you remember. So Ramaphosa didn't announce who he preferred in that position. I believe even that has been settled on Zingiswa Losi, who's one of the deputy presidents of COSATU. So that's not an issue for them from where I'm sitting. But you never know, because horse trading is still underway. As Becky Cele once said to us, we will be trying to lobby each other right up until people go cast their votes. So, but I do think for Balega, it's too late. The most you can get.
She was very dismissive of that question about wouldn't she face criticism for not endorsing the female candidate, given that, you know, she has also been part of talking about how the ANC should be ready for a woman leader.
Absolutely. She came out on that, saying, you know, she's a female person. She's female. She's female with a lot of experience. So she came, that was part of her ticket. But it didn't pay off, because you've got the machinery that is the Women's League that was, of course, empowering and pushing for Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. So in that regard, she had no chance. But to suddenly flip-flop like this, and I understand that in previous weeks, she's again continued with the message about the importance of a female leader. At the very last minute, now it's not relevant. At the very last minute, all cadres are equal. What does it say about you, Baleka Mbete?
It is campaigning at its best, City. Let's talk about the numbers. Yesterday, it was quite interesting. We saw both camps holding their own caucuses, which was essentially a show of force from both sides. It started earlier with Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's campaign, holding that meeting to show us that we have got the numbers. And also, then it was followed by Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa's campaign, also holding their own caucus late in the evening to show us that we also have the numbers.
Everything is about a show of force. As we're speaking about the different caucuses that met yesterday, I keep thinking about even the singing, where we want to be the loudest to make ourselves look like we actually have the numbers and we've got the room filled. But the interesting thing about those caucuses, I think, for the Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma camp, was the images with Didi Mabuza standing alongside Sitla Zigalala and Supra Mahumapelo. That, for a lot of people, is, yeah, there is no such thing as a unity ticket, or rather, the unity ticket is equal to NDZ, which is something that they've been arguing for the longest time. So you've got those people trying to show that this is where we belong. But as much as we were shocked by the crowd that gathered in the afternoon, we saw the imaging that came out in the evening. just as full. And then you realize as a journalist or as an observer that this thing is right down to the wire.
It is going
so
down
tight.
to the wire. Somebody actually said to me, Mahlatse, remember, all you need is 50 plus 1 and you have won. So just one delegate can actually win it for one of those candidates.
Absolutely. As you're saying, just one delegate could change their minds. And that's also the tricky thing about the delegates, though. You could find delegates at a Cyril caucus or at a NDZ caucus, but they could actually completely flip when they're by themselves casting a vote. So that's the interesting thing that you have, is that you don't know. And you must remember that the one thing that has always been highlighted is that these people are vulnerable. Delegates are vulnerable. People are trying to buy delegates at this particular point in time.
Yeah, and of course, TD, earlier on, you also had a conversation with Colin Maine, president of the ANC Youth League. They are firmly behind Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Are they brimming with confidence?
That's what they tell us, but I believe they're paddling aggressively underground.
Yeah, and I mean, let's go back to the Mabuza. Him standing there next to Supra Mahumapelo, Sihle Zigalala, as we saw in those pictures, confirming that as far as he goes, he's now going with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma.
Absolutely, and him then confirming to us, at some point I went to go say hello to him and his deputy, and he said to me, I'm standing. I'm nominated, I'm standing. Before I could even ask him any other thing, like, how are you, sir? Have you been well? He said, I'm standing. Just know that I'm standing. So absolutely says he wants to become the deputy president of the country. He wouldn't give me much information going forward with regards to what he thinks his chances are, whether he thinks he'll emerge. But the one thing that particular camp has been trying to tell all of us is that but they buy a pezulu, that they know for a fact that they will ascend to power. They do genuinely believe that Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma will make it as the ANC's next president and ultimately the country's first female president.
Did you have any comments, Colin Maine, on, you know, the fact that all of these allegations of tampering with delegates are coming from provinces that are supportive of their campaign?
Colin Maine is firm in the fact that he believes that it is a target aimed at decampaigning Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, as opposed to a question really about the chairpersons and whether or not they're able to run processes in their provinces, or whether or not they're able to run legitimate processes at that. So he doesn't see it as an indictment on the chairs in those particular provinces. He thinks the problem is, again, the judiciary that's trying to fiddle with ANC processes and determine the outcome of internal processes for the political party.
And you know, with the Youth League, you know, yesterday I'm sure he was quite excited that President Jacob Zuma was praising them yesterday in his closing address.
Absolutely. They're very happy with President Jacob Zuma's delivery. But the one thing that is a sticking point for myself and a few other people observing how the Youth League has gone about its campaign is the issue around backing the slate that they've backed. There are no young people that you're seeing that they want to see in the top 6. There's no generational mix in the top 6 either. And I asked him about that this morning, and he said to me, you know, he kind of fobbed me off, but ultimately saying to me, the ANC is not about electing just the top 6, it's about electing officials, including the NEC. And as far as the Youth League is concerned, there are young people in the NEC. I don't think that's an answer. I think they've failed because before him, he had leaders pushing to see younger people in the top 6. That includes the Fikile Mbalulas, even the Julius Malemas during their 10 years. And he failed to understand or to at least answer that, saying there'll be young people in the NEC.
Well, you are watching our special edition of Polotiki. We're coming to you live from the Nasrec Expo Center. It is day 2 of the ANC's elective conference. As we've mentioned, it has been delayed. The ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe had promised us that by Sunday we would have a new president of the ANC, but that has been delayed because A, we could not have credentials adopted. That process has been postponed to today. We were expecting things to get underway in plenary at around 9 a.m., but it looks like it's just going to be another slow start to day 2 as delegates are yet to make it onto the precinct chair. Of course, that credentials conversation or heated debate, as we're expecting it to be, it's going to be closed to the media. We will not have access to it. But obviously, this is quite a crucial part because this is where both sides will be able to determine where they actually stand with the numbers. Of course, allegations that the whole system of registering delegates has been fiddled with. There has been delegates that were swapped, legitimate delegates swapped for bogus delegates, and how the ANC handles that will be quite crucial. And both sides are saying that they're going to fight to ensure that the credibility of this conference stands, and those that should not be at conference with voting rights will not be allowed. And essentially it's because it's the battle, it's, as Tidi was saying, this battle is going to the wire. It could be one vote that determines who wins this conference. Earlier on, as we were saying, Tidi Madia spoke to Colin Maine. Let's take a listen.
You accused the judiciary of being what you call a super brother, if you recall, to News 24 a few days ago. And the one thing, though, that was sticking in your criticism was that you felt that provinces that were supporting Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's bid to become the next ANC president were being targeted. Should that not be an area of concern? What does that communicate about those provinces and about processes in those provinces and the PECs and how they handle the BGMs to you?
No. It's not really the case. If you remember, there's such a case in the Northern Cape as well, just like the case we had in KZN. But because the majority of the people of the comrades in Northern Cape support a particular candidate, they don't get the same treatment from the judiciary. But we understand the agenda of what they seek to achieve. And I think branches of the ANC delegates are ready to crush that which they represent.
It's not an indictment on how those provinces are run and how the ANC is run in those provinces. In your eyes, it's not that at all.
No, it's not the case. It's targeting branches because it has got nothing to do with provinces. It's about branch and numbers here. It's a game of numbers, so that there are people amongst us, in our view, who work tirelessly to lead the ANC.
You are one of the loudest supporters of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma as the ANC Youth League. Are you concerned at all about the knock she's taken from those that are impacted by court judgments, those particular branches, provinces and regions that have been affected?
Singapore, whether there are branches that have been knocked, we are happy where we are and are just waiting to adopt and vote.
There was a massive caucus. I saw the images coming out in the afternoon for a massive NDZ caucus. We saw images of Northwest Chairperson Supra Mahumapelo, KZN Sihle Zigalala, all gathered with delegates who are, we understand, in support of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Were you part of that caucus? What was being said to delegates there? What is important for delegates who are part of the NDZ grouping expected to do when they go to credentials and when conference continues today?
You know, I can't discuss Congress credentials here. It will be quite unfair. But
expectations on the delegates' part?
The expectation is that we must adopt credential and proceed with the business of Congress. And as for the gathering that you're calling a caucus, there's nothing wrong with leaders coming together and addressing delegates. I was part of that meeting. We agreed to meet delegates and prepare them for the Congress and tell them that, as the President requested, we expect maximum discipline from all delegates. For instance, I had to tell the delegates of the Youth League that.
You know, the Youth League has also been criticized. I think this is my parting shot. There's been severe criticism that the Youth League is behind an ancient slate, if you want to call it that, that you've got a 68-year-old candidate for presidency, that there's nobody there, there's no generational mix, that there's no win for the ANC Youth League in the slate that you're supporting, and saying that you're failing young people because you didn't back any of you to become a top lead in the ANC. And then in that regard, you failed in your mandate as the Youth League.
Yeah, you know, you must understand the constitution of the ANC. Any member of the ANC qualifies to elect and to be elected to any position in the organization. And there are no slates here.
But should you not be advocating for younger people to also be represented?
There are no slates here. We are not. This Congress is not about electing the top six. It's about electing the National Executive Committee, which the top six is part of. And in the NEC, there would be young people.
That there was the ANC Youth League President, Colin Maine, speaking there to our politics journalist, Tshidi Madia. Of course, Tshidi Madia and the rest of the team will be bringing you all of the breaking news stories as they happen here at the ANC's 54th National Elective Conference. Now we're going to be talking some analysis, and I'm joined here on POLOTIKI by our resident analyst, Ralph Matecha. Good morning.
Good morning, Matlaki.
It's day 2. Credentials still to be adopted. We expected this.
Yes, indeed, we expected this, and I think this is the main thing holding this conference. If they cannot deal with the credentials, they will not have conference, because it will mean that anything else that will have flown out of this conference without acceptable report on credentials will be subject to any form of a challenge, could be null and void. Therefore, they have to deal with this. But where we are, I think it will not be outlandish to say that they failed to adopt the credentials yesterday. That is what has happened.
Yeah.
So already we have got one day, we are already into borrowed time, and I think we are going perhaps to see a lot of tensions today regarding the credentials. If they fail to adopt credentials today, I can stick my neck out to say if they don't do it today, this conference will have collapsed. It will. I think I can say that if they don't do it by the end of the day or by later in the evening, they do not get to that, chances are that the conference will most likely collapse.
Sitting there next to Ralph Matecha is resident analyst in Mpumelelo Mkabela. You've covered ANC elective conferences before. Have we seen this where on day 1 the conference cannot adopt credentials? Because essentially it means the conference hasn't really started.
Yeah, well, even Polokwane, which remains the benchmark for a highly contested conference of the ANC, we didn't see this. Credentials were actually sorted out on the first day. The conference happened actually according to schedule. It was done according to schedule. Never mind the lobbying and all of that. So this is the first time that the ANC is not able to sort out credentials on the first day, if my recollection serves me well. And so there are two options. Either, as Ralph says, the conference will collapse if it doesn't adopt credentials today, or there's agreement to extend it by an extra day or 2.
You know, we spoke to a couple of NEC members, and they were saying even if that is the only thing that this conference deals with, they are willing to have that debate until the bitter end, even if it takes them 4 days, Ralph. So maybe by today they might not be finished, but tomorrow they will definitely be having that conversation.
They are also committed not to agree to each other. That is one thing that they came here for. It's not like they're gonna find that reconciliatory space or that conciliatory space. The difficulty here, Matlati, is that this issue that is being dealt with the credentials today, it is not a technical issue that just comes through a conference. It's not because they maybe used a Mac computer instead of a Lenovo to put it on the system whatsoever. It is a deep issue. The problem of the credentials is what comes from the branches, because it has a lot to do with how the processes of nomination went about, and also about the people who are to be sent as delegation to come and pass that mandate here. I mean, you know, when I was talking to people in Mpumelelo earlier on, someone told me that about one of the branches in Northwest, someone said to me that they won the nomination, but we won the delegation. This is where the problem comes about. And I think those problems, you couldn't deal with them there. They are now being kicked to the conference. It was bound to happen. You failed to deal with this thing at the branches. You kicked the can down to the regions. You fail, kick the can down to the province. You have got the court. You kick the can down to the conference. Someone's got to pick it up. And I think that maybe if they have to stay here for 30 days to solve it, maybe they will be able to deal with it. But it will require a great deal of work for them to reconcile and deal with this.
And you know, Secretary General Gwede Mantashe tried to play down some of these problems. I mean, we've written stories about things like the signature campaign, because one of the things that's supposed to happen at a branch meeting is that everybody who attends that meeting is supposed to sign off on that register, and then that signature has to be compared to the form that they used to join the ANC. It's actually as manual as that. And what happened was that sometimes people would have have a meeting, decide on who is their candidate, and then go around the township to try and get those signatures. And sometimes those signatures just did not match.
Yeah, and they were caught out, a lot of them, during the branch auditing process, which was led by the SG. So when it declared that there's a certain number of branches that have been audited and are cleared, it was after he had taken care of all of those potential irregularities and actually got rid of them. So that's why some branches didn't actually qualify to send delegates here. Some of them didn't qualify because they didn't correlate. Some of them were given extensions to say, look, you are a branch in good standing, but you just couldn't get the numbers to actually meet and correlate. So they were given a chance to correlate. And some of them actually, they actually used that opportunity to get their act right. But that rigorous process, I think, is the one that is actually helping the ANC to actually figure out who actually is in the wrong and who isn't. And actually that is also the same criteria that was used for branches in the Free State, in Northwest, in Bojanala region, and in KZN and other places, to actually, as a basis to complain, to say, we can complain because we think that we are credible, we have to be represented, but the way the branch was conducted didn't actually go according to the rules.
I'm wondering here, I mean, how do other parties do it? You know, I mean, it is really quite an intensive process that the ANC gets involved with. I mean, on paper, it looks good in terms of ensuring that the right people end up at a conference of this magnitude for the party, but it clearly is very open to abuse.
Indeed, it is open to abuse, and if you look at it within the broader context of other political parties, you know, you can differ with the ANC, but if you look at its processes, at least the institutions, the way in which they are being set, you can say that it is one of the most democratic parties internally, in terms of the way in which institutions are being set. I don't think any political party in South Africa can compare with that kind of a process, the rigorous process and the steps. But the problem, as you are saying here, is that the honesty among cadres of the ANC. You can put institutions there, but what's going to happen is exactly what you're doing. Actually, ANC members have perfected ways to violate their own constitutions and gain their own procedures, because the ANC constitution there, it guides them on what they need to do. But there is a great deal of dishonesty where these internal institutions of the ANC are no longer holding up because of the type of cadre that this party tends to attract these days.
That's true. I mean, look, the problems in the ANC are not because there's a lack of rules or you have to develop new rules. It's just a question of members and leaders not complying with their own rules, violating them. And then when they are caught out, they defend themselves to the bitter end. So in other words, they actually defend themselves for violating the rules. So that's what you find in KZN. They get told twice by a court of law, so you violated your own rules. And they're in denial about that.
And refusing to leave office.
So it's not for lack of rules. It's the willingness to comply with the rules, even if the rules are biting against you.
That is very true. Of course, we will be continuing with our resident analysts, Mpumelelo Mkhabela and Ralph Mateja. But earlier on, I spoke to the chairperson of the ANC in Limpopo, Stan Mathabate, who admitted that there are problems with the credentials. Let's take a listen. What are the problems?
Basically, well, the secretaries are dealing with that, the provincial secretaries and the deputy secretary general of the African National Congress. The issues are with the branches. Firstly was the issues of the courts, the provinces that have been affected, whose members have been affected by the courts. But at the same time, you also have other provinces where you've got delegates who are supposed to have been who are supposed to have been registered, but who have not been registered because of discrepancies here and there. So those are the kind of discrepancies that they were trying to clear. The secretary, the provincial secretaries, and the DSG throughout the day yesterday.
It has to be said for the organization when during conference you're still dealing with allegations of attempts to manipulate delegates that were elected by branches.
Very sad, very sad. I mean, if you consider these three provinces, for example, which had to be told by the court what they ordinarily had to do in their own provinces. they had to wait until they are here to be told by the court that you are supposed to do this in terms of your own constitution, and you haven't done it. It's very sad. I must say it's very sad. The African National Congress must do something about that.
Do you think conference is still at risk? It's obviously day 2 of the conference, and yesterday we saw challenges around the adoption of credentials. What are the problems?
Basically, well, the secretaries are dealing
sorry,
with
we're
that
experiencing some technical problems there with that interview with the ANC chairperson in Limpopo, Stan Matabate, but admitting, well, he's calling it discrepancies, but, you know, others not on tape are saying this is an attempt to steal an election.
It's not a discrepancy, Matlati. I mean, it's like coming to a conference and saying that we've got everything else going well. We've got one little tiny problem. We don't know who is a legitimate delegate to be here. That's a major problem. The people who are supposed to be here are supposed to be the people who are properly mandated, who have come through proper, open and fair processes of the ANC. It is a very big issue. And again, this thing goes back to Polokwane. The thing is that the ANC branches have been decaying since then. Since Polokwane, there were task team after another to manage the youth league, to manage the branches. Under Mr. Mandasha's tenure, one thing he should, I hope it comes out in his report, is that he had actually seen the West within the ANC branches. He has had maybe on record to disband the highest number of branches maybe in recent time by the Secretary General of the ANC. It is a systemic issue. It's not a technical issue, no doubt. And I also think there is no court of law that will bring about any satisfactory kind of an arbitration out of this. The party members need to go back, renew their own branches, renew commitment to internal processes of the ANC, vet people who are coming into the party, ensure that the internal structures of the ANC, the NEC, disciplinary processes, NWC, they are not being hijacked by individuals for special interest within the party. They work in the interest of the party. What we are seeing today, it's not something that started 2 months ago or so. It's a culmination of the problems within the ANC for the last few years. They have been avoiding dealing with it. Today, it has made sure that they missed one day of the conference. They couldn't achieve what they were meant to achieve because of this issue.
Well, let's try and go back to that interview with ANC chairperson in Limpopo, Stan Matabate. It's obviously day 2 of...
The conference is going to be conducted to its finality. It will never collapse. Nothing is going to be allowed to collapse this conference. We are meeting regularly as provincial chairpersons, and all of us are of the same voice, the same weight, that this conference must continue. This conference must never be allowed to collapse.
You said in the beginning of the year this conference was quite important for the ANC, basically a do or die. Are you still standing by those words?
I am still standing by those words. You know, this conference is going to determine the future of the African National Congress. If we get it wrong here, I think our offsprings, the generations that comes after us, will regret for having had parents such as us.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that we are an epoch-making generation. This generation of the fourth revolution, industrial revolution. We are supposed to come up with views in this conference, not only the leadership, with views in this conference that is going to design and propel the economy in the right direction. And you can only do that if you've got the right team. You elect the right team, yeah? You can only do that if you get the right policies out of this conference. And that is our responsibility as the current leadership to do that. If we fail doing that in this conference, we shall have failed the generations to come.
Limpopo, of course, in this conference has endorsed or nominated Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa to take over from President Jacob Zuma. How confident are you that he will take it?
Very confident, very confident. I mean, This is the tradition of the African. We are doing that as a matter of principle, that you've got this person that we set down as the delegations from various provinces in the country and said this person is qualified to be a deputy president of the ANC, which therefore implies that this person, when the president is not there, will be able to deputize the president, which therefore falls in to say that even after the current president has completed his term, this person will be able to take over from the current president and become a very good president of the African National Congress. So currently, we are confident as Limpopo that Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa will emerge out of this conference as the president of the African National Congress.
Will that turn the tide for the party?
Yes, it will. It will. It definitely will. I mean, given his character, given his political acumen, given his understanding of the economy and the trends of the current trends of the economy, I'm sure that he's the right leader to lead this organization now.
That there was the chairperson of the ANC in Limpopo, Stan Matabate. Of course, they have endorsed Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. They want him to be the man that takes over from President Jacob Zuma. He says they are confident, they remain confident, they've got the numbers, but also admitting that there are problems. He's calling them discrepancies, but of course we know that there are serious problems with the credentials that are supposed to be adopted. It was supposed to be yesterday, but now we're still waiting. Mpumi, one thing that has been troubling when speaking to all of these ANC leadership is this fear that they continue to express that if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma wins, they've lost governing this country in the 2019 elections.
Yes, I mean there's a sense that Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's camp won't inspire voters to continue supporting the ANC. And that is primarily based not on the fact that, not only on the idea that she is not a good person, because there is no one, I mean, even the people who say that things are going to collapse are not suggesting that she's terrible. They're not suggesting that she won't be able to lead. They're not suggesting that she's corrupt. That's not the issue. The issue is that the people that support her are people that have been accused of corruption, the people that are fraudsters like Kalni House, and even the slate that is actually supporting her, from Didi Mabuza in Mpumalanga to people like Jesse Duarte, who's been linked to the Guptas as a DSG, and you know Ace Mahashule, who we know was part of a scam with the Guptas. His children work for the Guptas, and there's lots of money from the Free State taxpayers' money diverted from a dairy farm in Free State, channeled via the Guptas offshore and back to South Africa to fund a Gupta wedding at Sun City. So all of those people that surround her, from a campaign point of view as well as the slate, are people of really terrible character, people that the ANC would not like to have them lead an election which they can win.
You know, and Ralph, though, you know, this tradition business, you know, we know it creeped in towards Polokwane when they were saying Deputy President Jacob Zuma then is supposed to succeed President Thabo Mbeki. But, you know, does it stand as an argument?
This is some form of, I don't want to say it's a gentleman's agreement, but being able for members of ANC to be able to adhere to such kind of a tradition, it will entail that they are endorsing or they are adhering to some of the core values of the ANC as a political party. The core values within the ANC is that they need to find the best among themselves, and they know who are the best among themselves. But I don't think that tradition still holds. I don't think the ANC of today can still be held back to some tradition. They have moved away from that. It all started with President Jacob Zuma. Remember as well when he wanted to be the president there, he had to contest. But also very interesting is that when President Jacob Zuma contested for the second term, in Mangaung. He had to work for it as well. They wanted to oust him. I think tradition will have dictated that you do 2 terms and then at least you get it. But that tradition was broken. They brought in Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. I remember very well, Mpumelelo, in Mangaung, that the first week after Cyril Ramaphosa made the president, rumors started coming out that he's just a caretaker there. He's not there to be made the president subsequently. He's just there because the vote that is understood to have attained in Mangaung were the vote against the then Kgalema Motlanthe.
Yeah.
So it has carried on. There are contests. Fine, we cannot criticize the ANC for having a contest, but institutionalize your party so that it can be able to deal with the high intensity of contest. The whole thing of nomination is failing, Mpumelelo. Maybe it will work if all members of the ANC just vote.
Yeah, I wanted to...
Open all of them. Why are you having the nomination, which once you nominate someone, you have the delegates that you have to make sure you babysit them until the conference so that they can deliver that mandate, bags of cash changing hand. No, you've got 1 million voters, you've got a lot of people who are on that thing. Make it electronic or ask the IEC to preside on the election. Have all ANC members vote. It's not a logistical nightmare to have all ANC members just vote. It takes away all the conflict.
We do know that's part of the proposals in the constitutional amendments. Would it work though, Mpumi?
Look, at the moment, I do not see what's the significance of the nomination, especially at the provincial levels. I would understand if branches were to meet to discuss who should be their preferred candidate for what position. That you can't avoid, because the branch, according to the ANC constitution, it remains the most important basic unit of the organization. So you can't avoid branches discussing who should represent them, what should be the policy. So, and in that discussion, they will probably come with names. And those names will come to be known that branch so-and-so prefers this candidate. So in the end, we can make our own calculation how many voters each candidate is likely to get at conference. But I don't understand why should the nomination conference happen at the provincial level. What's the effect?
Well, yeah, the constitution says
because actually what that does,
yeah.
it's got a side effect of entrenching regionalism, because you are forcing the province as a structure of the ANC to take a position as a region around an individual. And our regions at the moment, and we know where we come from as South Africa, there's the issue of tribalism. Certain regions are dominated by certain ethnic groups of people. In Limpopo, you find dominated by certain, in Western Cape and KZN. So by forcing provinces to adopt a regional position, you're actually homogenizing what actually might not be a homogeneous support base for a candidate. And then people tend to clutter around regional sentiment that this person is our son of the... Stan Matabata himself that you interviewed, in one of the rallies that he ran in Limpopo, he said it's time that Limpopo has a second president after Sefako Mahato. So there's that kind of regional sentiment. KZN, it's also got that regional sentiment. Ralph, you say in Mangaung, there was a rumor immediately after the election that they wanted to go. In fact, it was not even a rumor.
It was said by KZN.
They started campaigning immediately without having seen whether Cyril would be a good president or not. So it was not about whether he will be good or whether he's got leadership qualities. It was about we want our own in KZN to succeed Zuma. So these provincial nomination conferences actually are very dangerous in the long run.
Yeah, okay, we'll come back to that in a bit. But yesterday we also managed to speak to the man of this conference, the guy who has been pushing for so-called unity, David Mabuza. He had a quick chat with our editor, Adrian Besson. Let's take a listen.
With the provincial chair of Mpumalanga, David Mabuza. Mr. Mabuza, how are you doing?
Good, good as always.
And how is the Unity project coming?
Very well. You can see delegates are singing about unity in the ANC. So it means the message has reached them.
Mr. Mabuza, it looks like there's only two front runners now for the position of president. Are you disappointed that the organization couldn't come to agreement around one candidate?
Well, it's up to the branches of the ANC. We'll all succumb to the internal democracy.
And is there a specific candidate at this stage that Mpumalanga will be endorsing?
Well, you have seen in the PGC, more or less it's what you have seen in the PGC.
So that's about 50-50 both sides?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was Mpumalanga ANC chairperson David Mabuza speaking there to our editor Adrian Basson. We managed to get some concession that those 233 branches that nominated so-called unity might be split down the middle, Mpumi. Your province.
Yeah, well, he seems to have given up on the idea that he can actually have some kind of a unity thing. So he has given up to that idea, and he seems to be suggesting that the branches, the delegates here, will vote more or less, as he puts it, more or less in line with what happened at the provincial conference. So we can assume that there will be more like a 60-40 or 50-50 split with the 230 unity vote on both sides of the, to either be on the Cyril side and the Dlamini Zuma side. So I think, in a way, his project is a failed project.
Do you agree that it's a failed project? I mean, failed in what sense? In the sense that there is going to be contestation for the top post, but succeeded in that he still stands as deputy president and he leads the nomination.
Well, you know what? This project is very interesting. There is just, it's failed in a sense that it just lacks details.
Yeah.
You know, who are part of that unity? You can't say, I want a unity. You are not willing to compromise anything. The thing with Mabuza is that he's not willing to compromise on anything. He gets the deputy president nomination, and after getting the deputy president nomination, he goes ahead and then say that, hey, I want my other candidate on the list. How about Paul Mashatile? He has made that suggestion. Something that looks like he did not even consult with Gauteng, because I don't think the people of Gauteng were happy for him to try to do that. So he has been, you can say, potentially destabilizing some of the provinces that are coherent. So his idea of unity is only meant to strengthen his position, and it is a failed project. He can't give details to that. I mean, when Adrian is asking him, I don't think he thought someone will ask him, how is the unity project going? And I think he didn't have a response. You can't say it's going well. You can't even get the credentials. What is it that is going well here? For crying out loud, I don't see anything that is going out well.
Actually, Ralph, the project failed even at the provincial nomination conference, because if you combine his unity vote, remember he instructed people to write unity.
Yeah.
If you combine the total number of votes, that's 230, I think, who wrote unity. And then you combine the people who actually decided to vote for somebody. They voted for Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in the majority, and Cyril Ramaphosa got the second largest number. If you combine the Cyril Ramaphosa vote and Nkosazana, which was a defiance of the DD's unity vote, they are more than the unity vote combined.
Yes,
so in a way, he's been defeated in his province around the unity issue.
And actually, people in Mpumalanga said it worked for them, because usually they do live in fear of David Mabuza. The intimidation did not happen this time around because he wanted to project himself as a unity candidate. So that allowed for people to campaign in the province openly.
Indeed, I mean, he has actually told how many people voted for this unity?
233.
233.
Oh, yeah.
Now you have 233 delegates who are willing to swing either way. He has created that big chunk of uncertainty. They can go and trade. They can actually end up even defeating him, because if they are not going with him, that unity that is said, there are those that voted for his slate, no doubt, for Dlamini Zuma's slate. That is the slate where he naturally belongs. This very unity group actually can end up actually even defeating him. Who knows if they will trade in the direction of Cyril Ramaphosa if it comes down to the voting, because they are willing to. He said to them, think creatively. And unfortunately, it's created an instance where they could think creatively beyond what he wants. It could come to backfire for him.
I get a sense that he really played the NDZ campaign, because when we get here to conference, we saw it happening at Policy, and now yesterday during caucus, he's there standing with Sihle Zikalala, the ANC Youth League president, Supra Mahumapelo, who of course have gone out to actively campaign for Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. But Didi has refused till this point to endorse her. He has refused to stand alongside her when she was campaigning in the province. And actually even her campaign in the province had to be delayed for quite some time because he was just not coming to the party.
And more importantly, just to add to that, Didi has never gone out actively to campaign for a particular individual or to campaign for a particular slate. So what actually started the whole conversation was KZN. As we said earlier on, KZN started lobbying the moment the conference ended in Mangaung. So what they decided that they thought if they can have Mpumalanga and then they would have KZN, they would have more or less have sealed the conference.
They've won it, yeah.
So the first person they lobbied was Didi Mabuza. They even took the unprecedented step of going to Mpumalanga to meet him. So they were actually quoting him. So he didn't have the courage to say no to them. So they just put him in the slate. But then after putting him in the slate, he never actively campaigned for that slate. He's always been saying unity. But then we have been put as the slate. Are you in this slate? No, I'm unity. But you are in this slate. So he actually didn't campaign for that slate, nor did he campaign for the city slate. When in the last moment, now it was now time for him to show. That was now 2 weeks before conference. The two leaders were in Mpumalanga campaigning. He could have appeared on either side to show that actually he belongs to either side. Again, he decided not to campaign or show any faction. In his PGC in Mpumalanga, again, he decided not to indicate which side he fell. So I think, given the fact that people have always feared him in Mpumalanga, his indecisiveness was in a way good for the democratic project in Mpumalanga because people were free to express themselves. Yeah. So you could see that they actually, some of them went with NTZ and she got most votes, some of them went with Cyril. So it was like a kind of like a free environment.
And the joke in Mpumalanga when I was there for the PGC, everyone was saying, you know what, we are ready for him to leave province. We want him to be somebody else's problem, as they continuously say, because there were some who were supporting Cyril Ramaphosa and some supporting NDZ who still nominated him for the deputy president position.
But you know, if I look at this position in context, I mean, Mpumelelo, throughout, Didi has survived very well under President Jacob Zuma's administration. Had there been a different president, possibly Didi could be facing charges of corruption. With all these things coming from Mpumalanga, his contentious tenure and the report and so all sorts of stuff, you wonder how did Didi manage to still preside on over a province to this extent. So if you look at it within that context, for me, his neutrality position, it's actually against Dlamini Zuma. I've got a sense that he wants to be with Cyril Ramaphosa, but I also think that the people within Cyril Ramaphosa's camp, Didi is like what you call, it's like a hand grenade with a pin off. You toss it and if you hold it, it's going to explode. You can't undertake an integrity ticket and raise Didi's hand as Cyril Ramaphosa.
That was the challenge.
The only concern, I think, that I think his bargaining was that I can bring you the numbers from Mpumalanga, I can try. But what do you bring? What do you give me in return? And for Cyril to have Didi as a deputy president, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
You can't. The opposition are going to be on your case the next day, and certainly you cannot go into 2019 with such kind of a script. It is not going to work. So that is why I think he's being rejected by Cyril Ramaphosa and he's playing the Dlamini Zuma camp.
Of course, we're going to be continuing with our special edition of Politiki, but I need you guys to call it. I need your predictions. We've got our Twitter audience that have basically said that they see Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma winning this conference. 77% of them are saying that, and then only 23% are saying it's going to Cyril Ramaphosa. Let me start with you, Mpumi. Are you ready to call it?
Yes, I can call it based on the information that we have, but with a kind of like a conditionality that things might change because from the time of the nominations to now, people have been lobbying each other. So the nomination are telling us that Cyril had a lead of 500 voters. and if you take the unity vote of DD in Mpumalanga and give them to NDZ, the 230 something, Cyril will have the lead of just over 200 or just 300, something like that. And if you take the fact that the people that have been disqualified from participating in this conference, 27 PEC members from Free State and 27 from KwaZulu-Natal, as well as the other branches, you have just about over 90, if not 100. And those are people who would have voted for NDZ. So that kind of like widens the gap, the lead that Cyril Ramaphosa had at the nomination level. So if we look at purely on those numbers and disregard other factors, Cyril will emerge. And also if I look at the mood from the plenary yesterday, the fact that there was no enthusiastic support for President Jacob Zuma's announcement of every time he mentioned radical economic transformation, I would have expected a huge applause, which would have indicated that this is the message that goes to NTZ. That didn't come through. So based on those factors, I would call it Cyril marginal.
Okay, Prof, quick one.
You know, I think they're very close in my mind. I've earlier on called it for NTZ, looking at how the structures of the NC function and all that. But Cyril went on to actually attack some of those areas that could have strengthened NDZ, dealing with KZN, making sure that some of those provinces don't come. Also, it has got psychological implications. Let me put it this way. You can lead with the numbers, but it's quite another thing to win a conference.
So who are you calling it for?
I think that those who know how to win the conference, the NDZ people know how to win a conference when it comes to working the branches and so forth. But when it comes to the numbers and the popular mood is something else. The popular mood, I will call it for Cyril. The popular mood, even outside the NC, the views is that people are believing that Cyril will win this.
Okay, so our two analysts are still believing that Cyril Ramaphosa is going to take this conference. But of course, before we can get there, credentials have to be adopted. Before we leave you on Polotiki, there's a different battle that is happening outside of the premises that we are in. It's the battle for the ANC voters' wallets. The merchandisers are out there selling anything from shoes, dresses, T-shirts. Let's take a look at this video compiled by News 24 journalist Aleta Harrison.
Back CR17, we specialize in that. KZN, even when they say it's Nkosazana Zuma province, we've been selling very good. There's other guys who do for Nkosazana Zuma. We don't listen to those, we only listen to ours because we believe that we are doing for a good guy.
We got the shoes, we got the right stuff, professionally produced, mixed and mastered. Sales today have actually been more than what we expected. Our most popular CD is this one, and then the difference between the two, this one is for ANC in general, and then this one is specific for Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma.
Well, that is the different battle happening outside of these premises as they try and get the ANC delegates to buy as many of the merchandises that is outside there available. Unfortunately, that's all we had time for on this special edition of Polotiki. We are still here to give you rolling coverage of what happens in day 2 of the ANC's National Elective Conference. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlase.